and the poor ones live till the weak are strong. Let your kingdom come.
Quite a few years ago, I had to have minor surgery. And so I went under the knife for the first time. And I remember I was sort of strapped down and my head was put to the side and there was a drape over top of me. And as I was just about to go under anesthesia, the surgeon said to me, "Now, Krista, if you happen to wake up in the middle of surgery, no problem. Just let us know." Now, I had never had surgery before, and to this day, I still think that is very, very strange. But I am very, very glad that he gave that information to me, because I did wake up in the middle of surgery. And so I'm laying there with my head off to the side, the drape over me, and I remember waking up and thinking, I hope this is not heaven, because it's really bad. All I see is some guy's knees down there. And I remember just sort of saying, "Hello, I think I'm awake." And I heard my surgeon on the other side of the room yelling, saying, "Krista, no problem, we're almost done. My student is almost done sewing you up." And I remember saying, your student? Well, we never talked about your student." And of course they could tell I was becoming more agitated. That was the very last thing I said, because the very last thing I heard was, "Give her 10 more cc's. And I was totally knocked out. Anesthesia is powerful stuff. And it reminds me of how I am anesthetized very, very easily, and how powerful it is to so many things that I should actually be awake to, that I should care about, but I am just knocked out and I don't even see things. I'm numbed right out. Let me explain. Jesus, many, many times in scripture, is described as coming onto the scene, whether he gets out of the boat or he walks into a village. He comes on a scene and he sees someone or a group of people, and scripture says he has compassion on them. We see that in Jesus feeding the 5,000 people. He gets out of the boat, he walks up onto the hillside, and it says, and he had great compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. There's a passage where there's a leper, a gentleman with leprosy who desperately wants to touch Jesus. He falls to his knees, and it says Jesus had deep compassion on him. The widow in Nain had just lost her son, deeply, deeply grieved, and Jesus, is we hear, has great compassion on her. That word in scripture in the Greek is called splunkna, and what it really means, splunkna, is defined as the guts, the bowels, the place in our body where we have the most deep, deep feelings. So in our context in English, we would say, "I love you with all of my heart," or "I can't stand that with all of my being." Splunkna is the word that we would use. We'd say, "I love you with all of my splunkna," or "I can't stand you in my splunkna," my guts, my bowels. And Jesus has this deep, compassionate, guttural response. That is his response to people in great need. And when I think about my life, and when I look at some of the accounts in the Gospels about the disciples, there's a very different response to people in need. There may be a little bit of a response, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of a sense of wanting to enter in, to suffer with, which is the way to define compassion. But it is tempered, it is numbed, it is dulled out. And I find it fascinating that scripture has lots to talk to us about that. Here's something that you may not know. There are about 7 billion people in the world, and a little over 3 billion people live on less than $2 a day. In fact, much of our BIC family around the world, Latin America, Africa, India, are people who live on less than $2 a day. Now in Canada, in North America, the top 1% of the world's richest people hold the same amount of wealth as the bottom 57% of the world. So if you make $55,000 a year, which many of us do, you are in the top 1% richest people in the world. If you make $35,000 a year, you are in the top 5% of the world's richest people, and only 1% of people in the world are able to go to beyond secondary school education. So we in North America are the rich. We are loaded with resources. And when we hear this and we think about people who are living on less than $2 a day, we sort of feel it, don't we? We sort of cringe, our heart sort of, we feel it in our splunkna. We feel it in our guts. But do we respond? Do we continue to feel that same sense of ownership, that same desire to care for, to suffer with, to enter in, like Jesus demonstrated so clearly in the Gospels? I think about being anesthetized. I think about what is coursing through my veins. I think about the enemy. And John 10 describes the enemy as one who comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy this abundant life that we're designed to have. And I think as people who follow Jesus, we're designed to live an abundant life of love and purpose and overflow and grace and generosity. But the thief has come to steal, to kill, and to destroy. I think he is filling his syringe with an anesthesia that is very, very subtle, but very, very effective. Here are some of the things I think are filled in his syringe. I've written them down here. Instant gratification, a sense of entitlement, an addiction to comfort, and a pursuit of convenience. 4 things: instant gratification, sense of entitlement, addiction to comfort, and pursuit of convenience. Those things are coursing through my veins. I want to be comfortable. I'm always looking for things to be very convenient. I feel entitled to the things that are due me, and I want to be gratified all the time. And I don't know if you can commiserate with me on that, but I see that all over the place in my purchasing habits, in how I spend my time, the things I think about, just my constant desire to be comfortable and to be happy. But it often comes at the expense of having deep compassion for others and the willingness to enter in and to suffer with. Let me get a little biological for a minute. Not too biological though. When you think about the splunkna, the guts, the bowels, when things are moving well and free, things flow. They are as they should be. And when things are not moving well, you're a little stopped up, it is not how it's supposed to be. So what is anesthetizing my splunkna? What is anesthetizing the deepest parts of me? What is anesthetizing my ability to follow through the way Jesus did? And I think it's those 4 things, and we have to be thinking about those things. Really, really profound how they impact how we live, how we do community. And I really do believe that we need each other to sort of take stock. How do I live a way that I want to gratify myself all the time? I want to be comfortable. I want things to be convenient. I have to look at the stuff in my life. I have to look at the image I'm trying to portray. I have to look at the relationships that I have. There are many, many ways that these things come into play. And I have to remember that that is the attack of the enemy. That's a very, very sort of subtle way, but my veins are coursing with this, what I call culture's Kool-Aid. It is just coursing through my veins all the time. In the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, we learn that the disciples were moved. They were concerned about the people on the hill. They wanted people to get fed, but they were so tripped up by the money that it would cost, the time it would take. And Jesus asks something very simple. He actually wants the disciples to feed them. He says, you go feed them. And they're sort of freaking out. How am I supposed to feed them? And Jesus said, give me what you have. Very simple. And we know how the story goes, right? The disciples go, they find 5 loaves and 2 fish, and they give it to Jesus, and Jesus takes it, he blesses it, he breaks it, and he gives it back to the disciples so that the disciples can distribute this food to the hungry people. The story doesn't end there though. After everyone was fed, each disciple was able to pick up a basket, this sort of personal gift, this overflow of abundance. But it all started with Jesus just saying, give me what you have. Jesus knows that we are going to struggle. Jesus knows that the enemy is out to get us, that we have culture's Kool-Aid coursing through our veins. But he encourages us to cozy up to him and to give him what we have. He's the one who multiplies it. He's the one who does the miraculous work. He's the one who helps us have this deep compassion. But he wants us to be aware of what is around us, what is coursing through our veins, what is tripping us up. And he invites us to join him as he sort of advances his kingdom, as he sort of continues to help meet the needs of people. But he uses us. He says, give me what you have. There's a passage in Matthew 25, and it is Jesus talking about the end of days, the final judgment. And he talks about sheep and goats. And he says, the sheep and the goats will be separated. The people who heard my voice and followed me, and the people who didn't. And then he says this, the king will say to those on his right, the sheep, the people who followed, come, you are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me. And then the righteous ones will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you are doing it to me. God does not want us to live a life of paralysis. He wants to invite us into the party, to the abundant life, not a life of paralysis. He invites us to join him, to give him what we have, so that those who are thirsty will have something to drink. Those who are hungry will have something to eat. Those who are lonely will have someone to visit. It's really clear in Scripture that Jesus cares deeply for those who are vulnerable. He has deep compassion on those in the margins, those who are in need. And he invites us to join him, to give him what he has so that he can multiply it through us. I don't want to be filled with culture's Kool-Aid. I want to be very aware of what's going on in my life. And my prayer is that we will all do the same.